The evening sun settled its last golden rays over the Windsor estate, a colossal mansion perched like a crown on the cliffs of Montauk. The family's ancestral wealth was carved into every inch of the palace. Arched windows, white stone walls, stained glass glowing in the dusk. It was the kind of place built not just to be lived in, but to remind the world of how long a dynasty had ruled. Up the cobblestone drive, a sleek Rolls-Royce glided silently. From it stepped a woman whose presence carried more weight than any royal introduction could. Clara Josephine Bellamy, age 72, founder and CEO of Bellamy Global. With silver hair styled to perfection, skin like polished mahogany, and a plum-colored coat draped across her shoulders, she moved with quiet majesty. She wasn't here for favors or validation. She was here to seal a merger that would bind her $6.3 billion empire with the Windsor dynasty, one of the oldest and most powerful white families in American finance. The Windsor dinner was already in full swing when she arrived. Crystal glasses clinked, violins filled the air, and conversations swirled with the perfume of entitlement. Yet, as Clara entered, her presence barely rippled the room. No one rushed to greet her, no hand extended in warmth. To many gathered, she was an outsider. Wealthy, yes, but still a woman, still black, still not one of them. And then it happened. A voice, soaked in arrogance, cut through the laughter. "Who let the help walk through the front door?" The room erupted in sharp chuckles, the kind of laughter that doesn't last long but stings forever. The words had come from Graham Windsor, the brash heir of the family empire. At 38, Graham was infamous for scandals, drunken yacht crashes, careless comments, and a smugness inherited like property. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Clara did not falter. She turned her gaze directly to Graham, held it for 3 steady seconds, and then, without a word, turned on her heel and left the banquet hall. Her departure wasn't a retreat. It was the planting of a seed that would grow into the destruction of everything the Windsors thought untouchable. That night, guests whispered about her exit, dismissing it as dramatic or unnecessary. But Clara wasn't walking away from power. She was stepping into it. Her silence wasn't weakness, nor was her composure submission. It was strategy. Where others screamed or fought back with fury, she had chosen dignity. And in doing so, she had laid the foundation for a storm that would shake the Windsor Empire to its core. This was never going to be just a business story. It was about power clashing with prejudice, about the refusal to kneel when others tried to humiliate. Clara Bellamy's silence at the Windsor estate was not the end of her influence. It was the beginning of a revolution in how the world would remember dignity, power, and leadership. The morning after her walkout from the Windsor estate, a leather folio arrived at Clara Bellamy's penthouse. Embossed with the Windsor crest, sealed in wax, it was carried by a white-gloved courier who stood stiffly outside her door, waiting just long enough for her to notice the symbolism. Inside the folio, a note, cold, curt, and stripped of respect. "The Windsors request your presence for a private dinner. Attire, formal. Agenda, final merger discussion." It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. Clara sat by her bay window, the New York skyline glittering beyond her, and studied the card. To the world, the $14.7 billion merger between Bellamy Global and Windsor Holdings promised to reshape entire industries. To Clara, it was something deeper, a question of legacy, of who gets written into history and who gets erased. She had spent 50 years clawing her way from a basement startup in Baltimore to the top of global finance. She'd endured boardrooms where she was mistaken for an assistant, meetings where she was addressed as Miss, while her junior white male employees were addressed as Sir. She had been dismissed, underestimated, and humiliated. Yet she had built an empire so strong even the Windsors had no choice but to notice her. Still, they hadn't respected her. At the estate, they hadn't treated her as an equal partner but as a spectacle. A box checked, a trophy of diversity. Graham's insult had only confirmed what Clara already knew. They weren't interested in partnership. They wanted absorption. They wanted her empire without her dignity. So she made her first move. Quietly, surgically. She typed a short message to her legal team. Pause all negotiations with Windsor Holdings until further notice. No public statements. NDA reminders to all parties. CB. That single instruction triggered shockwaves. Meetings were cancelled. Deadlines suspended. The business press noticed immediately. By noon, whispers turned into headlines. Cracks in the Bellamy-Windsor deal. Investors speculated. Rivals circled. And the Windsors scrambled. Inside Windsor Holdings' towering glass headquarters, panic brewed. Margaret Windsor, the matriarch with a reputation for icy calculation, convened an emergency board meeting. Graham, ever arrogant, brushed it off. She'll be back. She's old school. She plays the long game. But Margaret wasn't so sure. You don't understand women like her, she warned. She doesn't throw tantrums. She calculates. And when she strikes, it's precise. Clara's strategy wasn't to shout her humiliation to the world. It was to let silence do the talking. She didn't release statements. She didn't rant on television. Instead, she invited 5 of the most powerful institutional investors, men who held sway over billions, to a private lunch. Over simple roasted chicken and rice, she looked them in the eye and said, "I won't trade my dignity for a signature. Decide what kind of company you want to stand behind." Within days, 2 of those investors shifted assets away from Windsor Holdings. Their stock dipped, just slightly, but enough for markets to smell weakness. At the same time, whispers began circulating. Something happened at the Windsor estate, something ugly. Clara had not spoken a word, but the narrative was moving in her favor. Her silence was more dangerous than any outburst could have been. The Windsors had tried to humiliate her. Instead, they had given her a stage. And Clara Bellamy was teaching them, and the world, that silence, when wielded with precision, was not surrender. It was strategy. By the end of the week, Clara Bellamy's silence was no longer absence. It was a roar the world couldn't ignore. The press speculated endlessly. Had she been insulted, slighted, or betrayed? Anonymous whispers trickled into business columns. Something happened at the Windsor estate. No one had proof, no recordings, no leaked photos. Yet the absence of evidence only fueled curiosity. Clara herself never addressed it, but her refusal to explain made people listen harder. Soon, the story stopped being about a merger. It became about dignity. Television hosts debated whether Clara had walked out over racism. Op-eds in financial journals praised her restraint as a new kind of leadership. TikTok exploded with reenactments of the silent exit, with young women draping coats across their shoulders and walking out of rooms with heads held high. Clara had said nothing, yet her image alone had transformed into a cultural symbol. The Windsors, meanwhile, felt the ground shift beneath them. Margaret Windsor, ever perceptive, warned her son Graham, "You've given her the perfect stage," and she walked off it like a queen. Graham scoffed, dismissing it as theater. But Margaret knew better. Clara wasn't winning because she screamed louder. She was winning because she didn't need to scream at all. Then came the spark that turned whispers into wildfire. A young journalist, Yasmin Cole, released a podcast episode titled The Windsor Estate Incident. She wasn't famous, but she was credible, and she had spoken to insiders. A server, a valet, a maid. Each account hinted at what Graham Windsor had said that night. And then came the revelation. There was a camera hidden in the chandelier of the dining hall, silently recording the entire event. The podcast spread like gasoline on dry brush. Millions listened within hours. Protesters gathered outside Windsor headquarters holding signs that read, "Where's the tape?" and "Respect isn't optional." For the first time, the Windsors were not only humiliated but hunted. And then, behind closed doors, the proof surfaced. Clara's team received an anonymous email containing the video file. Grainy but undeniable, it captured everything. Graham's smug smirk, his whispered insult, the nervous chuckles of guests, and Clara rising with quiet authority, laying her napkin down, and walking out without a single word. Her exit was regal, unmistakable, and unforgettable. Her advisors urged her to release it immediately. Clara refused. Not yet, she said. Timing was everything. She would not let the video appear as revenge. It had to be more than evidence, it had to be a statement. 2 weeks later, she made her move. Invitations went out for a public address at Lincoln Center. The world buzzed. Was Clara finally going to speak? On the night of the event, the hall was packed. Students, activists, CEOs, janitors, all sitting side by side. Clara stepped onto the stage in a white blazer, hair pulled into a simple bun, and began, "I have been silent, not because I doubted myself, but because I knew the storm would come either way. And I wanted it to arrive with truth, not noise." Then the video played for the first time. 62 seconds. No music, no editing. Just truth. And when it ended, Clara said softly, "This is what it looks like when a woman decides her worth is not negotiable." The standing ovation was thunderous. Across the globe, headlines declared it not just a scandal, but a turning point. The world had seen the insult. More importantly, it had seen Clara's silence transform into something stronger than outrage, a revolution in dignity. The moment the video of Clara Bellamy's silent walkout was released, the world shifted. Within an hour, it had millions of views. Within a day, it dominated headlines across 40 countries. CEOs, politicians, universities, and nonprofits rushed to declare their support. Training programs were rewritten overnight, businesses issued statements, and women everywhere echoed the same sentiment. "We are Clara." Inside Windsor Holdings, the walls were collapsing. Investors fled, partnerships were suspended, and board members resigned. The company's stock plummeted as the market smelled blood. For the Windsors, humiliation turned into existential crisis. Margaret Windsor saw it clearly. "This isn't just about Clara. It's about us being unfit to lead in a world that no longer bows to legacy." But Graham, blinded by arrogance, refused to see the truth. Instead of learning, he doubled down. First came the smear attempts. An old, doctored video of Clara spliced to make it appear she had mocked diversity. The internet didn't buy it. Witnesses from the original event surfaced, releasing the uncut footage. "Nice try," one filmmaker tweeted, "but you can't edit dignity." The smear backfired, further exposing Windsor desperation. Clara, meanwhile, chose not to fight in the mud. Instead, she built. She launched the Bellamy Standard, a rigorous framework requiring corporations to prove real equity, representation in leadership, fair pay, opportunities for ownership, and external audits to keep receipts honest. Companies lined up to comply. The golden door seal, the symbol of the standard, began appearing on storefronts, websites, and products worldwide. Clara's movement had outgrown her. It was no longer about one woman. It was a philosophy. The more she built, the smaller the Windsors became. Graham tried one last weapon: forged documents accusing Bellamy Global of corruption. But digital forensics exposed his fingerprints all over the plot. Federal investigators opened an inquiry, and soon, the evidence was overwhelming. Graham had orchestrated sabotage, falsified records, and spread misinformation to destroy Clara's reputation. A leaked video sealed his fate, drunkenly bragging to an aide, "It's not about truth, it's about collapse. Take down the woman and the rest will fall." The image of Graham Windsor being led away in handcuffs went viral. The dynasty that once sneered at Clara was now in ruins, undone not by lawsuits or vendettas, but by their own arrogance colliding with her dignity. The government introduced the Bellamy Clause, legislation protecting individuals from corporate smear campaigns. Clara had not only dismantled an empire, she had reshaped law. And yet, at her core, Clara remained the same woman who had walked silently out of that gilded dining hall. In her final public speech, she stood on the rooftop of a Harlem youth center, surrounded by young black girls learning to code. "I've been tested," she said. "But this was never about me. Movements cannot live in one name. They live in you, build louder than they can silence." Then, with the same grace she had always carried, she announced her departure from Bellamy Global. Some saw it as an ending, but it was not. Almost immediately, Murals of Clara appeared across the world, her silhouette framed by a golden open door. Students adopted the Bellamy Standard in classrooms, activists carried it into protests, and corporations measured themselves against it. Clara had left the stage, but her legacy had multiplied. In her garden, away from the cameras, she left a final note on her gate. "I didn't build an empire. I opened a door. If it's still open, step through it and build something better." The Windsors had tried to humiliate her. Instead, Clara Bellamy became immortal, not through wealth or revenge, but by turning silence into a legacy of power that no dynasty could erase.